Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to cover one of the 4 stages of data processing in a project environment. We're going to cover data gathering. This is where we include things like brainstorming, interviews, focus groups. Also, we can also look at that. We can even look at surveys and questionnaires. So it's quite important that whether you're a project manager or a project member, you also appreciate how data is actually gathered in a project environment. How do you collect data in a project environment? And then you use it to additional stages like your analysis, your representation, and also on your decision making. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Oscar Mbira. I'm a certified project and program manager. In this video, I'm going to cover data processing in a project environment, which is one of the most important activities that you can ever expect in a project environment. So let's move on. In a project environment, when you're starting a project and you're executing a project, you're monitoring a project all the way up to closure, there is normally a lot of data that is coming in. I can give you a good example. It's like when you're running any business, you always collect some data to do with your business. The same also applies to project management. So in project management, as you initiate your project, execute a project, and then close your project, you collect a lot of information all the way along the journey. And one mistake I've seen so many project managers making is not to take advantage of that information. They collect, they make decisions, they move on, that's it. I can tell you, managing data, you might want to call it data, it's the same thing. Managing data in a project environment is very, very critical. It's very, very important. And you should consider that whether you're a project manager or you're even just a project member or even a project team manager. The information that you collect is very important for your decisions. So there are basically 4 stages that you take through the data that you have in a project environment. So the first one is data gathering. We are going to cover a number of items or ways to gather data. For example, we talk of brainstorming as an example of data gathering. We are also talking of, say, interviews. You can also interview people for you to gather information. You can also send questionnaires, and you can also do some surveys just to make sure that at least you're able to gather information. So data gathering, we are going to cover on that particular aspect. Then the second item is data analysis. So, after gathering the data, you also need to analyze it. You need to get more information, or you want to transform it from data, which is raw data, to information. That is also very, very important. You normally make decisions based on information. Say, for example, you want to analyze for the last week, how is the team performing in terms of, say, defect resolution, assuming it's a software company or it's a software project. How is the team performing in terms of attending to requirements from the user, resolving issues coming from the user? So that is what is called trend analysis. You also want to look at variations, say, for example, cost variation from last month to this month. So this is all part of data analysis. Then the third one is data representation. How do you show the information that you've been collecting over time, whether it's a week, it's a month, or it's a year, pertaining to that project? How do you represent it? Especially when it comes to stakeholders or people who are not involved in the day-to-day running of the project. How do you represent that information? So we are going to look at histograms, for example, which shows the distribution of the information. We are also going to look at a number of them so that we appreciate what exactly does it mean when you say want to represent data that is coming from the project. Then the last one, which is very, very critical, is all these stages. You are gathering data, you are analyzing it, you are also representing it. You now need to make a decision. Should we increase the budget? Should we increase the resources? Should we reduce the resources? Are we supposed to adjust our schedule? And so on and so forth. So that is why it's very important that, especially if you're a project manager, you make what are called data-driven decisions in a project environment. That is very, very important. And this is what we are going to cover in this particular video. It's going to be quite interesting, and I would encourage you to watch this video all the way up to the end. So let's move on one by one. We are going to look at these 4 stages: data analysis, data gathering, data representation, and then decision making. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe button, and the notification button, so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. It will also help this channel to grow. It will also help this channel to produce more videos like this one. So you could be asking, Oscar, why does data matter in a project environment? I'm going to explain to you. Data management in a project environment is very, very important. And one of them that you have to appreciate is decision making. Don't make decisions based on opinions or based on bias. Always try to make sure that your decisions, they are based on the data that you are collecting when either before starting the project, during the project, and even when you're closing the project. You cannot make a decision based on personal opinions in a project. Always try to understand, especially from all the stakeholders from the project team, what information is available for you to make that decision. So it matters because you need to make a decision. Number 2, why it matters to have data management or understanding in a project environment is also on risk management. You also need to manage risk in a project. But how do you manage risk if you don't understand what is going on? If you don't collect the information that is required for you to understand probably the impact of the risk, the probability of the risk, and also the proximity of the risk. So it's quite important that you appreciate and understand that you use that data for decision making, you use that data for risk management. If you want to understand more about risk management, I've created a video on risk management. You can also watch it on my channel. I'll also leave a link in the description below. Then the next one is you want your stakeholders to trust you. Stakeholders, they don't normally trust you based on your opinions. They also want you to back up your opinions with some data. Next, with some information, some numbers, okay? So it's quite important that you also collect this information in a project environment. I've seen some scenarios where the information is scattered all over. You find someone has got an Excel sheet sitting somewhere, someone has got a Word document sitting somewhere, someone has got a plan of activities sitting somewhere. So this is where we encourage you to have the project management information system, PMIS. If you want to explore some of these tools that are existing, I'm going to leave a link in the description below. You can also check some of these tools where the information is actually centralized and it becomes very easy for you to manage information in a project environment. Then you also need to use the data for continuous improvement. Some they want to call it lessons learned. You cannot learn something until and unless you understand what was it, what caused it, how can you improve it, what are you learning, and how can you apply it into other projects or into the organization as a whole. So data management in environment is also very important because you also use it for continuous learning, you also use it for lessons learned. You're asking, what do you mean by continuous improvement? So when you're running a project, there are certain repetitive phases that you might face in a project environment. You do it and then you do it again, you do it and then you do it again. Say for example, you are doing construction project. You want to build a 20-story building. So after finishing the first floor, you repeat the same thing for the second floor, you repeat the same thing for the third floor. But there are certain lessons that you are picking from that process. So this is where I'm saying, those lessons that you are picking, you need a way to manage them. You need a way to gather them and then improve the next stage and so on and so forth. In a project environment, when you have all the data, it's easier for you to control the scope. It's easier for you to control the costs. It's easier for you to also control the schedule. So data management in a project environment is very important because you also control the scope. You also control the schedule as well as the budget. You cannot control the budget without gathering information on how much has been spent for the previous phases, how much you intend to spend for the next phases. So data gathering is very important, and this is where it becomes very important for you to make decisions. If you want to dive deeper into understanding what is project management, I've also created for you a very comprehensive ebook, which you can also access using the link in the description below. With these 4 stages in a project environment, the first stage we're going to go through, now we're going deeper into these stages, is data gathering. So let us go through in terms of data gathering. We want to appreciate, what do we know? This is the essence of data gathering. What do we know about the project environment? For example, you might know that a certain supplier is getting out of business. You gather that information. You might learn that from the previous project, you needed maybe say 40 human resources for this type of project. So let's go through data gathering processes one by one. So what exactly is data gathering? Data gathering is a way of collecting information about a particular project process and then use that information to execute the project. So that's a simple definition of, you're collecting information in a project environment and then you use that information for additional decision making, analysis, or even representation. So there are so many ways to gather information or data in a project environment. And I can tell you, never stop gathering data in a project environment. When you're initiating a project, make sure you're also gathering data. When you're planning your project, you're also gathering data. When you're doing execution of project, and I can tell you, execution is the longest stage in a project environment. And this is where a lot of data is actually created. So make sure you're also collecting that. Then you also have monitoring and control. Also make sure you're also collecting data, because this is where you're going to make some comparison or variance analysis or even trend analysis. Even when you're closing, also collect some data. This is where you also make sure that your lessons learned register is also updated. So these processes, at any given time, it might not mean that these techniques we are talking about on data gathering, it's applicable everywhere. You need to tailor it according to the project. So the first one is brainstorming. I can tell you from my experience, brainstorming is one of the most important data gathering technique in a project environment. So what do we mean by brainstorming? Brainstorming is a process of bringing together different or divergent views on a particular issue to try to come up with a solution, to try to come up with a way forward. So brainstorming, you look at the different skills, different work streams in a project environment that are actually pertaining to that. You don't bring everyone into a brainstorming session. What I normally do in my projects, because I normally create work stream team leads, I bring them and then some additional maybe members we know they're going to contribute. Then you present the issue, then allow them to brainstorm as to, is it the best? What can be done? What is available? What is not available? What are the constraints? What are the assumptions? And so on and so forth. So brainstorming is one of the important techniques that you can use for data gathering. So let us look at exactly what is brainstorming. What are the advantages and disadvantages of brainstorming? So brainstorming, in a nutshell, it helps to set clear topic and problem statements. So in brainstorming, you bring in a certain group of people. The people who are going to contribute, you don't need to bring everyone else. Then you have to make sure that the topic that you are talking about, everyone is aware. And make the environment very level. Don't allow those domineering characters to be speaking. There are others who might be quiet but with good ideas. So allow everyone to contribute in that brainstorming process. And also make sure you're inviting the right stakeholders into the brainstorming session. Don't just bring anyone that comes to that. And as a PM, you should be facilitating this. This is very, very important. A PM, one of the roles of a PM is facilitation. If you want to appreciate and understand the roles of PM, I've created a video on the other roles of PM that you have to play in a project from time to time, switching from one role to the other. And one of them is facilitation. I'll also leave a link in the description below. You can also watch it from my channel. Then during brainstorming stage, always make sure that you are capturing all the ideas. Don't listen to one person. Capture all the ideas, whether you're using a whiteboard, you're using a shared screen or whatever. But the best is to use a whiteboard. Use a whiteboard, put down all the ideas, And then probably later on, try to group these ideas using what is called affinity diagrams. You can also group them, or even mind mapping. You can also group the ideas so that it helps you to analyze them, okay? Then, after grouping the ideas, you have to choose or prioritize what ideas are supposed to be used and which ones are not supposed to be dropped. This also helps you to gather a lot of information, especially I normally use it during the planning stage. You want to get as much information as possible. I also use it also in initiating a project, especially when I want to create or update the stakeholder register, or when I'm going through the stakeholder identification process. You bring a lot of people into one room. They can also help you to say, this particular item, yes, this one is it's actually a stakeholder, this one is not. Someone will say it is because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you gather a lot of information on that. So it's quite important that you also use brainstorming as a technique in gathering information in a project environment. So information gathering is very important. And like I said, you also need to gather information from the beginning of the project all the way up to the end of the project. And the second technique we're going to look into in terms of information or data gathering is interviews. So interviews, this is where in most cases you have face-to-face discussions with any of the interested stakeholder. Remember, a stakeholder is anyone who is affected positively or negatively, or who is also affecting the project, or who is perceived to be affected by the project. If you want to understand more about stakeholder management, I've created a full video on stakeholder management. You can also watch it on my channel. I'll also leave a link in the description below. So interviews are very important as a technique for gathering information. You create the questions that you want to ask the people you're going to interview. You sit with them, you ask your questions, you note down whatever their response. In this day and age, you can even record if you have agreed with the person to record. Then you gather information about the project. How do people see the success of this project? How do they understand what is the failure of this project? What is the success of this project? What resources are required, and so on and so forth. From their experience, how long did it take to complete a specific task, for example? If you want to monitor the project, what information are we supposed to gather? So interviewing is very, very important. And where it's applicable, try to make it face-to-face. Where it's not applicable, then you can make it virtual. But the good thing about interviews is it's different from an email, where you just send an email, you wait for someone to respond. But for interviews, you talk to someone, then after talking to someone, you get quick feedback. That is why I was saying face-to-face is better than just sending some document and then you expect someone to respond. So interview must be structured, or it can be unstructured. So what do you mean by this? Structured, it means you have predefined questions that you want to ask the interview person. And these predefined questions, especially when you're working with the seniors, it's easier to give them well in advance before your discussion. They don't want to be surprised by some of the questions coming in. Then you can also have unstructured interview. This is where you just talk, generic talk with people. You can even go for a small discussion over lunch or dinner. Then you start asking what you want to understand more about that project. It's also part of interview, and it's also something that is workable. I've used it in my project, and I believe you can also use it in your project. So just make sure that you have unstructured or you have structured interviews that you are taking through. It will also help. It's one of the very important techniques that you can use during data gathering in a project environment. So the other technique that you can use to collect data in a project environment is the focus group. So what do you mean by focus group? Focus group is it's a group of experts in a certain area. Say, for example, it's a software development project. You have experts in coding, for example. You have also experts in solution design. So if you want to gather more information about solution design, you put together a focus group of experts in solution design. And then you brainstorm, or you even understand, you ask questions, you discuss, you come up with a solution for a specific area. So focus group is very, very important. And focus group is not just taking everyone. You're just looking at experts, people who have experience in that area. or even people who are even teaching or they are lecturing in that area. So depending on the type of project, you also need that focus group so that you gather as much information as possible. They have a lot of experience, so you can even understand historically what was done when a certain problem was faced. You can even understand historically what was causing a certain problem to happen and how long did it take to apply such a solution. So focus group has got also its own characteristics, and one of them we are going to look at is typically it must be 6 to 12 participants, and it must be facilitated by a trained moderator, someone who is able to moderate when things get hot or when there are arguments. And then it also has to be interactive. You talk to people. If it's possible, make it physical. If it's not possible, make it virtual, but just make sure that it's also interactive. It's very important that you also make use of focus group in terms of data gathering. You get a lot of information from these experienced people, and that is quite important that you include it as part of data gathering in a project environment. And then the last one on data gathering that we're going to look at is what is called a checklist. A checklist is a list of items that you have to tick against or to confirm against as you gather information in a project environment. So checklist is also one of the techniques that you can use. You can say for example, do we have the mobile-friendly interface? Is it available? Or what's going to happen when it's offline? Do you need it? For example, are you integrating with anything else? Are you going to use emails? Are you going to wait for feedback? Is it synchronous or asynchronous? All those things. So it's quite important that you can also use a checklist as a data gathering technique. You also have a questionnaire. So questionnaire, you have a document, or if it's electronic, you have a list of items where you ask the users to put or to select information. It could be closed-ended, which means it's a yes or no. It could be multiple choice, which means they're choosing one or two answers. Or it could be a Likert scale, where you rate 1 to 5 or not. Or it could be open-ended. So questionnaire is also one of the items you can use, one of the techniques you can also use for data gathering in a project environment. That is very, very critical. Let's look at which method to use when it comes to data gathering, as you can see on the screen. So, if you are brainstorming, it is best for idea generation, risk identification, and also problem solving. And then the group size must be between 5 and 15, and the speed is very medium as well as depth. When it comes to interviews, you have deep individual insights and also sensitive topics. It's best for that. And also group size must be 1-to-1. Speed is slow, but the depth is also very, very high. When it comes to focus groups, you also have consensus building and also expert input. You have experts to give you feedback, and the group size should be around 6 to 12. And then medium in terms of speed, and also the depth is very, very high. When it comes to checklist, it's a standardized requirements that is best for standardized requirements, and nothing is actually missed because you have a standardized requirement. You tick what is in, what is out in terms of the checklist, and then the group size can be any, and also it could be, you can also use fast for speed, and also it's slow on depth. So checklist can be physical or even electronic. So that is why you have any size. Then when it comes to surveys, it's best for large audience and also comparable quantitative data. Which means if you have got a large audience, survey is easier. In this day and age, you use technology. You can either have a website or an application where people can give feedback in terms of the surveys. And this is also unlimited in terms of group, and the speed is also very fast, as well as the depth is also medium, low to medium. If you want me to create more videos based on what we have covered in this video, or maybe there's a concept or there's an idea which is not yet clear to you, you can reach out to me or you can let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.